A wedding organized by the factory, one of Ethan Cole's college classmates showed up at our door with a baby bump. "I'm pregnant." "It's Ethan's," she said. I wasn't the least bit surprised. I immediately contacted the factory's logistics department and arranged for a different bride. In my previous life, I chose to hide this incident and married Ethan anyway. But later, on the green train back to her hometown, Emily Parker went into premature labor. In the end, both she and the baby died. When Ethan found out, his expression was calm and indifferent. Then, 3 months into our marriage, when I was pregnant, he shoved me down the stairs. That cold, detached face of his was full of blame. "If you hadn't hidden this from me, Emily wouldn't have ended up like that. Susie, this is all your fault." In the end, just like Emily, I died with my unborn child. When I opened my eyes again, I brought Emily with me and showed up at Ethan's place. I got straight to the point. "Your classmate is here. She says she's pregnant with your child." "Huh?" Ethan looked at me, a flash of panic crossing his face. Trying to appear calm, he pulled me into the room and had me sit down. "Susie, what nonsense are you talking about? What classmate? Who's pregnant with my kid? I don't know anything about this." Just as he finished speaking, Emily appeared at the door, her pregnant belly unmistakable. Ethan's attention was instantly captured by her. His gaze softened, and he quickly let go of my hand. I saw it all and felt a bitter ache swell inside me. Even though I had known in my past life that I wasn't the one he truly loved, witnessing it firsthand still brought a sharp, stinging pain. "Emily, what are you doing here? Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" Ethan rushed toward her, his eyes filled with the joy of becoming a father as he looked at her belly. I clenched my teeth, the taste of blood subtly spreading in my mouth as I stood there, helplessly watching them gaze sweetly at each other. "I went to the address you gave me." Emily started, then paused and looked at me. But this young lady was the one who opened the door. Ethan's right hand, hanging by his side, began to tap nervously. I knew that meant he was anxious. He always did that when he was about to lie. "Oh, I must have given you the wrong address. That's a friend's place." When I heard the word friend, a wave of sorrow hit me. We were about to get married, and yet I was still just a friend? Ethan was an orphan. In my past life, I had taken him in, so all his mailing addresses had been listed under my small apartment. After he graduated and got a job at the factory, he was assigned this unit. Not long ago, he moved out saying this was going to be our marital home and that he wanted to fix it up in advance. "Emily, you probably don't have a place to stay yet, right? Just stay here for now." Emily lowered her head and fidgeted with her fingers, glancing at me with a hint of mischief. "Would that be okay? Won't your friend mind?" She deliberately emphasized the word friend, then gently caressed her belly and put on a pitiful look. "Even though I'm carrying your baby, I don't even know if you're married yet." Ethan waved his hand confidently, trying to show off his masculinity. "Married? I don't even have a girlfriend." Watching them go back and forth like that made my heart bleed. "No girlfriend? Then what did that make me? No wonder I never got to move to the so-called marital home in my past life. Even after marrying Ethan, I still lived in my shabby little place. Once a week, Ethan would come to this apartment. Alone. I had always felt uneasy about it and fought with him over it several times, but every time, he'd just stare at me coldly and say nothing. Looking back now, this apartment was probably meant for Emily all along. I was never meant to live here. Watching them so wrapped up in each other, I quietly slipped out. I didn't expect that not long after leaving, Ethan chased after me, looking uneasy. His eyes filled with hesitation and guilt. He grabbed my hand and took a long moment before finally speaking. "Susie, Emily and I are just regular friends. We only made a mistake that one time. After we graduated, we drank too much and did something we shouldn't have. You can forgive me, right? But don't worry, the person I love most has always been you, and I promise I'll still marry you." As he said this, he glanced up at me cautiously. "It's just that Emily is heavily pregnant right now, and it's really inconvenient for her. That's the only reason I let her stay at my place for a while. Don't misunderstand. Just friends? Misunderstanding?" After everything he said and did, after the last life, when Emily's situation dragged me to such a tragic end, how could I still believe a word he said now? I pulled my hand free and quickly took a step back. Don't worry, I won't misunderstand. After all, it's not going to be me marrying you anymore. So why would I care enough to misunderstand? Relief washed over Ethan's face, and he let out a visible sigh. That cold, gloomy look of his was instantly replaced by a smile. I knew it, Susie. You're the most reasonable person I've ever met. Come on, I'll walk you home. He had barely finished speaking when Emily's soft voice called from behind him. Ethan, are you done yet? I'm not feeling well. Could you come sit with me for a bit? Just one mention of feeling unwell, and Ethan immediately panicked. He looked at me with a conflicted expression, opened his mouth, but couldn't get the words out. Susie, you see? His hand trembled behind his back, clenched tightly into a fist. He didn't have to finish the sentence. His meaning was clear. I spoke first to let him off the hook. Go. I know the way back myself. Ethan didn't hesitate. He turned and rushed back toward Emily like he was afraid I'd change my mind and stop him. I watched his retreating back, then turned away and wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes. In my past life, he had once stood outside alone in the freezing cold just to walk me home. That Ethan no longer existed. All that remained was this man who could coldly watch me die with his child still in my womb. Not long after I returned to my small apartment, a neighbor told me someone had come by looking for me earlier. Since I wasn't home, they had asked the neighbors to let me know, to remind me to go submit the marriage paperwork to the factory's logistics office. That was when I remembered. In my previous life, today was the exact day I hid everything about Emily from Ethan and went to the factory to register our marriage. Emily, heartbroken, went back to her hometown, and on the way home, the tragedy on the train occurred. But this time, since I had already brought Emily back myself, I clearly had no intention of marrying Ethan anymore. If he loved her so much that he could be cruel enough to destroy me for her, then let them have each other. I didn't bother preparing any documents. Instead, I began clearing the apartment of everything that belonged to Ethan. Before I realized it, night had fallen. I'd already filled a large bag with his things. That's when it really hit me. How much I had sacrificed for Ethan in my past life. I denied myself comfort, food, clothes just to support him through college. And in the end, what I got was a tragic, lonely death. With his belongings gone, the apartment suddenly felt hollow and empty. A huge space opened up. At that moment, I heard the sound of the front door unlocking, and Ethan's impatient voice followed right after. Susie, what time do you call this? You still haven't called us to eat. He opened the door with a scowl, and when he saw the mostly empty room, his face darkened even more. You didn't make dinner? What have you been doing? Packing things. Don't you know Emily's been on the train for days without a proper meal? She needs to eat well to recover. Just as I was about to say something, Emily, standing behind him, spoke up in a soft but bitter tone. Forget it, Ethan. Maybe Miss Susie doesn't welcome me here. We shouldn't bother her anymore. Ethan's face turned grim. His voice dropped, cold and cutting. Susie, I hope you can be more understanding. Emily's carrying a child. Don't make me too disappointed in you. Disappointed? I touched the still healing scar on my hand. Since the day I took Ethan in, I had planned out his every need, always making sure he had enough to eat, never letting him go without. I even learned new recipes just to keep his meals fresh and exciting. And now, it seemed like all the care and effort I gave was taken for granted. Worse, he even expected me to serve the woman he loved. My chest tightened with bitterness. I couldn't be bothered to say anything more to them and headed straight for the door. I had just reached the top of the stairs when someone yanked my wrist violently. The force was so strong I couldn't resist. My whole body was pulled backward and slammed into the concrete railing. Susie, don't go too far. Ethan growled. I only scolded you a little, and now you're giving me attitude? His grip didn't loosen at all. I've already explained everything to you. What else do you want from me? You're seriously still going to throw a tantrum? The pain was sharp and immediate. I couldn't even speak. I gasped through clenched teeth as my face turned pale and cold sweat beaded on my forehead. I bit my lip hard, staring at him with cold defiance. It was because I cared too much. Because I couldn't bear to see him hurt, I ended up like this. Devastated, betrayed. Even knowing he cheated, even knowing he had gotten his classmate pregnant, I still swallowed it all and married him. He had pretended to be indifferent, and then 3 months into our marriage, he had heartlessly pushed me down the stairs while I was carrying his child. Ethan looked at me, gritting his teeth as he took in my pale, pained face. With a sneer, he snapped, "Emily's just weak and sweating from hunger because of the pregnancy." "What? Are you pregnant now, too? You're pale and weak, though that child probably isn't even mine. If I remember correctly, I haven't touched you lately." I bit through my lower lip and finally caught my breath. Then I shoved him with all my strength. "Get out, Ethan." He froze, staring at me in disbelief. "Susie, what did you just say?" He pointed at himself. "You're telling me to leave?" I ignored him. Emily was standing at the doorway and deliberately raised her voice. "Miss Susie, you're not trying to make Ethan take responsibility for your bastard, are you? Women should learn to respect ourselves, know how to protect our bodies." Suddenly, the neighbors who'd been watching the commotion started whispering and pointing at me. Ethan naturally reached out to support Emily and gave me a contemptuous glance. Let him go. His shamelessness had long made him immune to embarrassment. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done such disgraceful things in the first place. Strangely, I didn't even feel sad anymore. Just a faint sense of absurdity and cold disappointment. I thought I had seen through him in my past life. Turns out, I had still underestimated just how shameless Ethan Cole could be. Looking at him, I gave a bitter smile. Thick-skinned? And who was I thick-skinned for, Ethan? Anyone can say that about me, anyone but you. I remembered in my past life when I adopted him. Because he had missed the enrollment period, I had begged the school principal for over 2 weeks before they finally admitted him. Right before college entrance exams, Ethan was so anxious he couldn't sleep. I had walked miles to the city god temple outside town praying for his success. I knelt so long that my knees were left with 2 deep scars. When he graduated from college and still hadn't found a job, I shamelessly went to the factory and pleaded with the supervisor for help. Even now, rumors about me were still circulating at the plant. But not only did he not care, he often acted like he didn't even know me, too ashamed to be seen walking with me. Ethan opened his mouth, his face showing a rare flicker of unease, but I didn't care anymore. Ignoring the stabbing pain in my back, I slowly walked back into my apartment and shut the door in silence. This time, I finally gave him what he wanted, a clean break. We were nothing to each other now, strangers. That night, I lay flat on my stomach in bed, afraid to even move. Every small motion sent waves of pain through my body. By the time I got up the next morning, a huge, swollen lump had formed on my back. I didn't go to the hospital. Instead, I went to Ethan's place. He had already left for work at the factory. Only Emily was home. I didn't waste time. I looked at her and asked directly, "Do you want to marry Ethan Cole?" Emily froze, her face flashing with suspicion. "Miss Susie, what are you trying to do?" I stared at her calmly. "Give me your information. I'll help you register. You and Ethan can get married." Once I had her documents, I went straight to the factory. The manager at the logistics office looked at me confused. "Why isn't this your paperwork? Isn't it you who's marrying Ethan Cole?" I shook my head and replied calmly, "It's not me. I have nothing to do with him anymore." But somehow, news of my visit to the logistics department and the marriage registry still spread around the factory. That evening, Ethan came looking for me. He held his head high with a look on his face like he was doing me a favor. Ethan said, "Susie Summers, since you already went ahead and applied for the group wedding at the factory, I won't embarrass you. But from now on, as my wife, you need to learn how to behave. No more of these little tantrums." I gave him a faint glance, my expression flat and indifferent. Seeing this, Ethan immediately frowned and snapped, "And I really don't like the way you're acting right now. Don't let me see it again. Since you're marrying into my family, you'd better follow the house rules. From now on, what I say goes. It's law." I let out a cold, mocking laugh. What century do you think we're in? Law? Are you still living in some fantasy? I nodded slowly and replied, don't worry. I understand. You definitely won't see this face again. I'll even make sure you never see me again. Ethan's face darkened with a deep scowl. We're about to get married. What kind of joke is that? I didn't answer. I simply smiled faintly, turned, and walked away from the factory. Ethan called my name a few times behind me, but I didn't look back. The next morning, just as I arrived at the factory, one of the supervisors called me in and said that my request for external placement had been approved. I was to report for the new assignment in 3 days. As it happened, that day would also be the day of the factory's group wedding. After leaving the supervisor's office, I went to HR to process my transfer paperwork. As I passed by the workshop where Ethan worked, it was buzzing with excitement. I glanced in instinctively and saw him smiling, holding Emily's arm as they greeted coworkers. Then, he led her into his office. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Now, Ethan, as a junior leader at the factory, had his own office. In my previous life, every time I was exhausted and wanted to rest for a bit, he would righteously reject me. He told me factory offices couldn't be used for personal matters. He never once openly interacted with me there, let alone acknowledged our relationship in front of anyone. But now, he was openly walking Emily, who wasn't even a factory worker, into his office holding her arm affectionately like he wanted the whole world to know. I shook my head with a bitter smile and walked away. If this had been my past life, I might have caused a huge scene. But not anymore. Now, I was done. I processed the paperwork and waited. 3 days passed quickly. The day of the group wedding finally arrived. Also the day I would leave. The factory was covered in red wedding banners and decorations. More than 10 grooms stood proudly in brand new deccan suits holding flowers waiting for their brides to step down from the decorated buses. Ethan, being a college graduate and a junior leader, was particularly well liked and received many congratulations from his coworkers. In that moment, he even felt a bit of anticipation. At that exact moment, another identical bus drove through the factory grounds. I was on it. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Ethan's smiling face. He instinctively looked up and our eyes met. A flicker of confusion and panic crossed his gaze, but I reacted quickly and drew the curtains shut. Ethan furrowed his brow and seemed about to ask something, but just then, brides began stepping off the bus parked across from his. He nervously wiped his sweaty hands and tried to forget the strange feeling from a moment ago. Then, beneath a flowing wedding veil, Emily appeared, her face shy and smiling as she walked toward him. Ethan's eyes widened in shock, his breath caught. You? Why is it you? Emily, visibly pregnant, came up and linked her arm with his. Of course it's me. Who else did you think it would be, Ethan? This is my surprise for you. Aren't you happy? Ethan stood frozen, unable to move, his face filled with disbelief. His bride, why had she suddenly changed? The bouquet in his hand was crushed in his clenched fist. He furrowed his brows deeply, unease written all over his face. Where's Susie? He asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. Wasn't she the one I was supposed to marry? Emily pouted, clearly displeased. Ethan, what nonsense are you saying? I'm carrying your child. How could you still be thinking about marrying someone else? Even if you wanted to, what right does Susie Summers have to marry you? Ethan stood there stiffly, his expression blank, unable to say a single word. It wasn't until he stood on the wedding stage that the factory logistics supervisor began urging him. Ethan Cole, it's your turn now. Step up with Miss Emily Parker. Still dazed, Ethan stumbled up to the stage. When he saw the banner above with his name next to Emily Parker's and then looked down at the marriage certificate the factory handed him with the same names printed, his world began to spin. His voice grew hoarse, his Adam's apple bobbing as he whispered. Why? Why isn't Susie Summers the one marrying me? He clearly remembered that he had been the one to register for the group wedding. The factory supervisor frowned, noticing how absent-minded Ethan looked, but still gave an explanation. Miss Susie Summers did come to register for the wedding, yes. but the paperwork she submitted listed this Miss Emily Parker. And isn't Emily staying at your place right now? She's even pregnant with your child. So, of course it's you two getting married. A loud, buzzing exploded in Ethan's head like a bomb, and a pain shot through his skull. The next second, he threw the bouquet from his hands and jumped down from the stage, rushing across the factory grounds to look for me. But the section where I had worked was already empty. It had been cleared out for the wedding. Emily, panting, followed close behind, annoyed and breathless. "Ethan, it's our wedding day. What the hell, what you doing?" Ethan looked around frantically, not even acknowledging her. "No way. Everyone in the factory is at the wedding today. If she's not here, then where else could Susie be?" He turned and bolted toward the old apartment. When he saw the door slightly ajar, he finally let out a breath. "Susie, I came to take you to the wedding." But as soon as he finished saying that and stepped inside, he froze completely. The entire place had been redecorated. Even the portrait he once painted of the two of us had been ripped off the wall. A neighbor who was cleaning up noticed him and quickly pulled him inside. "Oh, good, Ethan. You're here. Do you know where the key to the firewood shed is? I've been looking forever and can't find it. And I can't get in touch with Susie either." Ethan instinctively reached under the doormat and pulled out a familiar key. He numbly unlocked the shed. Inside, a large wooden box held all his things, even his old high school textbooks, were neatly packed in bags. The neighbor handed everything to him. "Susie told me to give these to you. She said they're all yours. Better take them with you. I'm remodeling this place and I need the space." The moment he heard the word remodel, Ethan seemed to snap out of his daze. His bloodshot eyes widened and he suddenly shouted, "How dare you touch Susie's house? Get out of here now." His roar startled the neighbor. "What is wrong with you? This is my house now. Susie sold it to me. Why wouldn't I be able to touch it?" Ethan's belongings were tossed out of the shed, scattering across the ground, and he himself was pushed outside. He stared in disbelief as the lock was changed and the door closed right in his face. Only one thought kept echoing in his head. She sold the house. That was when Emily reappeared, annoyed as ever, and tugged at his sleeve. "Ethan, listen to me. Whether you like it or not, we're legally married now. There's no more you and Susie Summers. That ship has sailed." Her words finally pierced through him. His eyes widened in disbelief and he turned around, grabbing Emily's arms tightly. "You knew, didn't you? You knew Susie gave up her wedding spot for you. Why didn't you tell me?" Emily pried his hands off, her face twisted in sarcasm. "And why should I? You got me pregnant and wanted to just walk away? I don't think so. I'm not letting you go. You're stuck with me for life." With that, Emily turned and headed straight for their shared apartment. Ethan stood there in a daze, as if all the light had suddenly vanished from his world. His mind flashed back to that bus pulling away from the factory during the wedding. The one I had boarded. I sat on the bus, looking out the window at the scenery. A calm I hadn't felt in years settled over me. Maybe it was because I had finally broken free of all that chaos and pain. But the weight on my chest had lifted. "Miss Summers, would you like to switch seats with me?" A voice said gently beside me. "The view's a bit better from here." I looked up, slightly startled by the strangely familiar voice. It was the young man sitting in the first row ahead of me. Instinctively, I glanced around. No one else responded, so I pointed to myself and asked him, "Are you talking to me? Do you know who I am?" Nathan Moore gave a small smile. "Of course I'm talking to you. You're the only one on this bus with the last name Summers. You're Susie Summers, the one everyone was talking about at the factory." I figured I should at least introduce myself. His deep, magnetic voice was oddly pleasant to hear. So familiar it made my chest tighten. But I couldn't place where I'd heard it before. Sensing my confusion as I frowned, Nathan chuckled lightly. "Sound familiar, doesn't it?" Then, in the exact same tone I'd heard countless times before over the factory's intercom, he said, "Attention, comrades. Today's workload is heavy. Please stay alert and on schedule." It clicked instantly. I glared at him. "So, you're that guy. The one I hate most at the factory. Every time we have to work overtime, it's because of your announcements." Nathan raised both hands in mock surrender. Hey now, I'm innocent. I was just following orders from upper management. Overtime wasn't my decision. We both laughed. It was unexpectedly easy. After over 10 hours on the bus, we finally reached our destination. That's when I realized Nathan was getting off with me. You applied for a transfer, too? I asked. I thought I heard you were about to get promoted at the factory. Isn't this assignment a waste? He clapped his hands and retrieved his luggage from the undercarriage, even helping to lift mine out, gentlemanly as ever. Just rumors. Besides, didn't I hear you were getting married? Why take an external post now? I stayed quiet for a moment before replying calmly, exactly. Just rumors. From that point on, I poured myself entirely into work. At first, the unfamiliar surroundings kept me constantly busy, but Nathan helped a lot with the more routine tasks. I hadn't even realized a month had gone by until I ran into Ethan again. Nathan and I were walking out of the factory when we bumped into him, Ethan Cole. By then, I already knew who Nathan was. Like Ethan, he was a college graduate, but he'd held various leadership positions back in school. This transfer was actually a promotion. He'd been appointed department head here at the new site. I never expected that he and Ethan would turn out to be old acquaintances. The moment Ethan saw me with Nathan, his expression changed. His face twisted. Susie, what are you doing with him? I stopped walking. The man in front of me looked completely worn down, disheveled hair blowing messily in the wind, wrinkled clothes, and a collar so darkened it barely resembled white anymore. I looked at him calmly and said, "And why does it matter to you who I'm with?" Ethan's eyes turned red. How could it not matter? Susie, you're supposed to be my wife. You were supposed to be mine. How could you let Emily marry me? You know it's you I wanted to marry. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. I'm your wife? Then why did you always treat me like a burden? Why did you never acknowledge our relationship at the factory? Why did you always run around with Emily instead? I held his gaze. You say I was the one you wanted, yet she ended up pregnant with your child. Why is that, Ethan? He froze, mouth half open, unable to offer any explanation. Nathan shook his head and stepped forward, trying to ease the tension. Let's all calm down. But Ethan shoved him aside. Stay out of this, Nathan. Don't think I don't know. You've had feelings for Susie this whole time. You followed her here on purpose, didn't you? You were the one who got her transferred here, weren't you? I knew it. Enough. Shut up, I said coldly, cutting off his shouting. I gave Nathan an apologetic look. He simply waved it off, unfazed. But Ethan looked completely shattered. You yelled at me. His voice cracked. You're yelling at me for another man? I rubbed my temples, genuinely exhausted. It was the first time I truly realized how impossible Ethan could be. His breath came in short bursts, eyes full of pain. Do you know how hard I've been searching for you? Do you have any idea what I've gone through? And now, not only do you not care, but you're like this, for some other guy? I looked at him, deep and steady. His eyes were filled with bitterness. In my past life, over 30 years, I had used every approach I could think of, but I had never seen him with this expression. Unfortunately, it was too late now. Some people simply didn't deserve pity. The person who should feel heartache for you is your wife, not me. Ethan, go back. From now on, there's nothing between us. I no longer acknowledged Ethan, who stood frozen in place. Without thinking, I pulled Nathan along and walked away. It wasn't until we arrived at the dormitory that I realized I had been holding his hand the whole time. I let go quickly and apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Nathan, his handsome face lit up with a bright smile, replied, honestly, Miss Summers, I kind of wish you had meant it. Then he added, actually, Ethan wasn't wrong about one thing. I do like you. And yes, I applied for this reassignment because I saw your transfer request. Those few simple sentences made my face heat up like wildfire. I nodded awkwardly, too flustered to say anything, and turned to head back to the dorm. After that day, I thought my chapter with Ethan was finally over. But to my surprise, less than 2 days later, he showed up again. And this time, he was living in the same dorm building as me. Just a few doors down. Susie, he said, I applied for a transfer, too. We're still co-workers now. I've thought a lot about everything you said. You were right. I acted thoughtlessly before, but I won't make the same mistakes again. I want you to know I really do love you. He looked at me earnestly, and without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away. That afternoon, while I was working in the factory yard, I suddenly heard a chorus of cheers and teasing. When I looked up, Ethan stood in front of me, holding a bouquet of flowers. He had clearly dressed up. He smelled faintly of soap, and his shirt was neatly pressed. These are for you, Susie, he said sweetly. I hope you can be as beautiful every day as this bouquet. His sugary words gave me chills. It was a scene I never thought I'd witness. But here he was, telling everyone in the factory that I was his girlfriend and that we were getting married soon. No matter how much I tried to explain, none of the co-workers believed me. I confronted Ethan, asking him to stop and to clear things up, but he just looked at me aggrieved. You were the one who used to complain that I wouldn't acknowledge our relationship. Now that I'm making it public, why are you upset? I gave him a cold look. If I'm not mistaken, you and Emily are still legally married, aren't you? You already got your marriage certificate. Are you trying to get me to report you for bigamy? Ethan froze. His face turned ashen and he stared at me in disbelief. If you keep slandering my name like this, I won't hesitate to have you arrested. I replied flatly, you didn't have a wedding ceremony, true, but does that matter? What matters is the law already recognizes your marriage. Ethan's face went completely pale. He looked like he'd lost all his strength, staggering slightly, and finally stared at my back as I turned to leave. Then he shouted, Susie Summers, is it because you've fallen for Nathan Moore? Is that why you're rejecting me? I didn't even look back. My voice, cold and steady, carried in the wind. If that's what you think, then sure. That confrontation finally silenced him. With time and effort, I managed to explain the situation clearly to everyone at the factory. Although some co-workers still teased me occasionally about Ethan, they had backed off considerably. That night, Nathan, whom I'd been avoiding for a few days, was waiting right outside the factory gate. When he saw me come out, he smiled slightly and said, So you've been avoiding me? Not at all. I said, keeping a straight face. I've just been dealing with Ethan's drama. Of course, I didn't admit the truth. Bracing myself, I walked with Nathan back toward the dorms. On the way, we ran into Ethan, who looked completely broken, wandering in a daze. When he saw me walking with Nathan, the expression on Ethan's face froze instantly. I pretended not to see him and instinctively stepped a little closer to Nathan. Ethan's features contorted with rage. His eyes bloodshot and in one swift motion, he lunged forward and grabbed my wrist. Susie, do you really have to be this heartless? He pleaded, voice strained with desperation. I looked at his despondent expression, my voice calm. You call this heartless? If this was heartlessness, then what about the way he treated me in our past life? Wasn't that 100 times worse? He had been so heartless that I gave him everything I had. So heartless that he pushed me down the stairs when I was pregnant. So heartless that he stood by and watched me bleed to death. Compared to him, I was far too soft. I nodded slightly, my tone flat. Yes, I'm being heartless. So what? Ethan looked like he had been struck by lightning, staring at me in numb silence, completely motionless. At that moment, a shrill, resentful voice rang out behind him. I knew it. Susie Summers, you've been scheming from the start. Emily stormed out, her voice rising in rage. You pretended to be generous, letting me marry Ethan, but it was all a setup. You wanted him to hate me. She pointed at me, trembling with emotion, her accusations loud and bitter. I had no words left. Think what you want. I said indifferently. Whatever's happening between you two now has nothing to do with me. I turned to leave, but Emily grabbed my arm, refusing to let go, demanding an explanation. Before I could respond, Ethan, now furious, slapped her hard across the face and dragged her aside. Why are you even here? He snapped. This is between me and Susie. What does it have to do with you? Emily's face went ghostly pale. A vivid handprint bloomed across her cheek. She stared at Ethan in disbelief. She had never seen him act like this, not once. Then she turned her hateful gaze on me, her eyes blazing. "What do you mean it's got nothing to do with me? Don't forget, Ethan, I'm your legal wife now." She screamed hysterically. Her body swayed, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed on the spot. Within moments, blood was pooling beneath her. Gasps of panic erupted around us. "Someone help. Call the factory doctor." It was Nathan who carried her in his arms to the small car used by the sub-factory and rushed her to the hospital. Ethan, stunned, could only look at me in silence. He murmured a weak "I'm sorry" before following them. Fortunately, the bleeding had been stopped in time. Emily had only fainted from extreme emotional distress. There were no serious complications. But because of the public nature of the incident, Ethan was formally reprimanded by factory management. He was stripped of his team leader role and demoted to a regular worker. From that day on, Ethan never dared to bother me again. In fact, he avoided me altogether. Emily, determined not to lose him, clung to him tightly every day. Not just to me, he kept his distance from all the other female co-workers, too. Before long, everyone at the factory knew that Ethan had married a possessive, jealous wife. People started to keep their distance from him. The next time I saw Ethan was on the day I agreed to marry Nathan Moore. It was another group wedding organized by the factory. Nathan held a bouquet in his hand, leading me gently onto the stage. Ethan stood off in a corner, Emily clinging to his arm. No one wanted to be near them. He looked like a shell of a man, hollow and lifeless, staring blankly at us. The moment he glanced at me more than once, Emily shrieked and drew everyone's attention. Embarrassed and humiliated, Ethan had no choice but to flee the ceremony. Later, I heard that Ethan, desperate to escape Emily, resigned and took the night train out of town. But Emily found out and secretly followed him. In total despair, Ethan jumped off the moving train. He shattered both legs and would never walk properly again. For the rest of his life, he remained trapped in Emily's grasp, a living prison worse than death. When I heard the news, Nathan and I were in the middle of discussing the layout of our new home. I shook my head and muttered, "Karma." At that moment, Nathan looked down at our marriage certificate, smiling like a fool. "Happy wedding day, Mrs. Moore." "Happy wedding day, Mr.